all just comes down to your mindset. There's the fixed mindset and then there's the growth mindset. People with a growth mindset, they're just trained to keep on going when things get hard and they say, I don't get this yet. And I kept repeating my old fixed mindset story. What are some of the things you tell yourself that might be coming from a fixed mindset and are quietly holding you back in life? Welcome to Reflections and Realizations. I'm Alveena. I write, I read, and I try to connect the dots between life, psychology, and faith. So this podcast is me thinking out loud. It's sharing what I've noticed, what I feel, and what I'm still trying to figure out. And today I invite you to sit with me for a while and to reflect and maybe catch a glimpse of your own story in mine. So I remember when I was in year 5 and we were learning fractions and I just didn't get it. I remember staring at the board, I had tears streaming down my face, and everyone else in the class seemed to understand. So that day, I internalized a story about myself that I couldn't do numbers. Maths wasn't for me. I just wasn't wired for it. And from that moment, I carried that story like an identity that, I excelled in reading and writing and history, but maths, that was just something to pass, not something that I could ever truly understand. So decades later, when I opened the portal for my module on statistics, that old panic just came rushing back. Regressions, correlations, and again, I just froze. I thought, I can't do this. But this time I knew that wasn't really the truth. It was the old story from my school days just sneaking back into my head. And this time, I didn't have the luxury to sit in a classroom and cry about it. My youngest was only in school for half a day, and all the children were due to break up for the summer break. And on top of that, we were moving houses. So I didn't have the capacity to spiral over regressions or correlations. So I just got on with it. And I remember I broke things down into tiny chunks. I pestered my sister who had majored in maths for help. And to be honest, I think I only got through it because I didn't have time to think about it. And by then, I had already read a book by Carol Dweck, the psychologist and Stanford professor who spent decades studying why some people thrive when things get hard and why others shut down. And her research uncovered something really simple, which is that it all just comes down to your mindset. So she popularized 2 basic ways of thinking. So she said there's the fixed mindset and then there's the growth mindset. So the fixed mindset says your intelligence, your talent, and your abilities, they're set in stone. So you're either good at something or you're not. And if you're not, don't even bother trying. But the growth mindset, on the other hand, says that your abilities can be developed and that talent isn't everything, and effort, strategy, and learning from failure matter more than being naturally smart. So people with a growth mindset aren't born smarter or more talented. They're just trained to keep on going when things get hard and they say, I don't get this yet, instead of, I'll never get this. Now, it sounds so simple, but it's a completely different way of being. Now, I remember years ago when I first learned about growth mindset, I immediately thought of my mum. Because at that time, I had just become a new mum to my second child and I had 2 under 2. And I couldn't wrap my head around how to get anything done. And then I visited my mum that summer, and being there made me realize how small my complaints really were. Because my mum, who's registered blind, was operating on a whole different level of figuring things out. So that summer, I remember she wanted to learn how to go on a walk to the local park by herself. So one morning, with my youngest in the pram, we set off. And I remember I kept talking to her throughout the walk. I'd say, Mum, when we enter the park, we turn right. So stick to the path. You'll know you're off track when you feel grass under your feet. And then passing the playground, I'd say, stop, Mum. Can you hear the ducks quacking? That means we're passing the pond, so we're halfway around. So that full loop took 10 minutes, and over the summer, we repeated it until she felt confident enough to do it alone. And then much later, I realized that that walk was more than a lesson in mobility. It was a lesson in mindset. Because here was a woman living with real limitations, and yet she refused to let her reality stop her from figuring it out. Meanwhile, I was a new mom, caught in all the things I couldn't do. I couldn't go to the gym anymore. I couldn't find a window to shower. And I kept repeating my old fixed mindset story. But seeing my mum navigate her challenges showed me that I needed to stop limiting myself. I needed to stop telling myself what I couldn't do and just start figuring out how to keep moving forward. And that's what growth mindset looks like. And whilst I didn't realize it at the time, even my faith was stuck in a fixed mindset. And I noticed this during a course I took on faith mindset. Before that course, I remember that my prayers, my dreams, my ambitions had always been small. I only asked for what I already believed that I could achieve. And deep down, I didn't believe that I could grow beyond my current limits or even pray for more, ask for more. But that course taught me how to pray bigger, to dream larger than anything I dared to hope for before. Not because that course made me more ambitious, but because I finally believed that I could grow, that I could achieve, and that I was worthy of aiming higher. I remember applying for a job shortly after doing the course, and this was something I'd never would have dared to do before because I had been out of work for 6 years. I was knee deep in nappies and night feeds and completely absorbed in motherhood. And yet, there I was, applying for a role I once would have thought was way above my station as an educational consultant, training teachers internationally. But for the first time, I wasn't thinking, can I do this as a stay at home mum who's just a teacher? Instead, I was thinking, how can I grow into this? And it felt scary when I applied, but I realized that the only thing that was holding me back before was my mindset. And this is not just a psychological idea. I've recently realized that this mindset runs through every culture, every faith, and even every era. Like, if we were to think of leaders like Nelson Mandela, he spent decades in prison, yet he never stopped believing that change was possible. He relied on persistence, on strategy, and he had a long term vision. And it was this way of thinking, this refusal to be limited by circumstances, that transformed his life and ultimately helped transform a nation. So now, in my own small ways, I'm trying to pass on that same mindset to my children. Because having lived with the weight of a fixed mindset myself, the last thing I want for them is to grow up thinking they're limited or by who they are or what they've done or where they come from. So if my daughter says something like, oh, I'm just not good at maths, or my son says, I'm just not sporty or I'm just not organized, I know that that's a fixed mindset talking. So we do simple activities like things I should tell my brain or things that I shouldn't tell my brain, so that visually they can start recognizing the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And in the day to day, I try to stay intentional with the language I use as well. So I'll say things like, I loved how you got up again after you fell on the ice rink. Or I noticed how you kept playing till the end, even when your team was losing. And essentially, that's Carol Dweck's work in action. So if I bring this back to you, What are some of the things you tell yourself without even realizing that might be coming from a fixed mindset and are quietly holding you back in life? Like, do you ever catch yourself thinking or saying things like, I can't ask for that promotion. I'm just not experienced enough. Or I'll never be able to balance work and parenting. Or I'm just not creative enough or clever enough to pull this off. Or other people are just naturally better at this than me. And what would it look like to challenge those thoughts, even just a little? So, if you're ready to make that shift, I've created a simple 2-step journal tool that I call From Fixed to Growth Mindset. So, step one, what you do is you spot the fixed mindset thought. So, write down a negative or limiting thought you've caught yourself thinking recently. Perhaps that's, I'm not a morning person, or I can't stay organized no matter what, or I'll never be good at public speaking. And then step two, reframe that with a growth mindset. So rewrite that thought, but this time with a kinder, more hopeful way to think about it. Like, for example, you can say, I'm learning how to create a morning routine that works for me. Or I can develop better organization skills with small daily habits. Or every time I practice public speaking, I get a little better at sharing my ideas. So do this regularly, and what this will do is it will help you catch those little fixed mindset thoughts before they take over. And slowly you'll start thinking differently. Because if I could go back and tell that 9-year-old me crying over fractions in class one thing, it would be this: stop crying about it, keep practicing, and ask for help. Because years later, you're going to ace a statistics module. Not because you became a maths person, but because you didn't give up. And here's the thing, right? Growth isn't about suddenly becoming good at something or instantly becoming confident. It's about showing up bit by bit, even when the story you've carried for years tells you you can't. Thank you for listening to Reflections and Realizations, and I'll see you in the next episode.